Hello everyone and welcome to the Crowcast preview for another week. I'm your host Scorpus and with me tonight on the cast is Feenix. How you doing?
Evening Scorpus, very well, and yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm just back in Melbourne after I made the trip over for the Collingwood match last week, I guess. Actually my first win that I saw at Adelaide Oval. I've been over there a couple of times now and unfortunately it's all been losses, so it's good to see a win over there, and hopefully we can continue that trend into Saturday night, where we're taking on Geelong, of course, at Simmons Stadium down there. This is at 7:25 local time for Melbourne, so I guess it's a little bit earlier for those of you in Adelaide. We've made some big changes this week. We've got two of our returning gun defenders coming in, Brown and Laird, coming out for that. McKay, who I think had one of the worst games of an Adelaide Crow this season last week, and of course Seedsman also omitted. For Geelong, coming in, Bartel and Buse, coming out, Lockie Henderson, big omission for them with that concussion, and Jordan Murdoch. Feenix, what do you make of the changes?
I really like our changes. The two small defenders really complete our defensive six, so excellent. I think McKay was the obvious. Seeds maybe a little bit contentious, but I think on form definitely Hendo deserved to stay in.
Yeah, I think it's one of those cases with Seedsman where he wasn't in the best form last week, but when we have our two guys returning who are obviously best 22 players, you've got to find someone to omit from the team, unfortunately, and he just didn't make the cut this week. We're actually pretty much going in full strength to this match, I believe. All the guys in our injury list at the moment are probably our depth players at the moment. For Geelong, they've obviously got a number of key omissions, Henderson being one of them, as well as Josh Caddy's still out with his knee injury, and Jackson Thurr has missed the whole season with his ACL. Both of those guys are probably best 22, so yeah, it'll be interesting for us. The last match, of course, Round 8 2016, Adelaide Oval. This was probably our worst performance of the season. Geelong won by 26 points after dominating the scoring shots 33-17. Guthrie had a career best game, 36 touches from him. Dangerfield 33 and 6 clearances, and best for us was probably Sloan with 28. Did you watch any of last week's match, Feenix, featuring Geelong and Fremantle?
Yeah, bits and pieces. I wasn't terribly impressed, to be honest with you. I think Geelong have got a few problems. It was interesting to hear Danger on radio basically confirm that they need an even performance or else they're just an ordinary team. So possibly a little bit harsh, but I wouldn't call them an ordinary team, but I don't think they're travelling at their best at the moment.
No, I agree. I think their form has definitely regressed since they played us back in round 8. In fact, to be honest, that was probably their best game of the entire season. It was against us, and since then I think they've been progressively getting worse and worse. I mean, since then they've lost to Carlton, Collingwood and St Kilda, and they, yeah, like you said, weren't very impressive against Fremantle. I think Dangerfield was probably the one that really kept them in that match. He kicked 4 goals, including that one that was quite clearly out of bounds.
Yep.
They managed to win with 10 more inside 50s, but they lost the clearances in that game. And of course, Henderson was badly concussed there. We'll just go through the team, the key matchups, I guess. Starting with the back line, how well do you think they match up with their now 3 talls? Usually they'd run with 4, but I guess this week it's 3. How do you see them going up against our forward? Sorry.
It's interesting because whilst I think they'll lose in terms of not having Henderson on the ground, having a small in for Henderson, Hughes comes in for him, they actually probably match up a little bit better. Having said that, it's going to be interesting to see whether they can contain both our pillars, Walker and Jenkins, without Henderson in the team, and I think one or the other is going to get off the chain a little bit at various points during the match. It's also going to be interesting to see whether Harry Taylor actually starts on Jenkins or whether they actually try to play him small and match him up on Eddie.
Yeah, I think the key thing that Henderson coming out for them will create that lack of a loose man defence that they've loved to play. With those 4 talls, it was usually either Taylor or Henderson that was floating around there mopping up everything, but with Henderson out, it's really going to force someone, like you said, maybe Taylor to Jenkins in a really accountable role. And even better for us, I think, it'll force someone like Kolajasny onto a direct matchup with maybe a Tom Lynch or even a Mitchie McGovern. And in both of those cases, I mean, Kolajasny's a great defender for Geelong, but he's young and developing, and I think either Lynch or possibly McGovern could have the wood on them. And of course, they've also got Enright and Buse down there to take on our smalls. But can you really see those matchups going in Geelong's favour?
Oh, look, not really. I think they're going to struggle to contain our forward strength, given that we rotate a few others in there. Richie Douglas goes through there as well a little bit. Jared Lyon sneaks up forward. I think we're going to prove a handful for them up forward this week.
Yeah, definitely. That will be a challenge for them. Moving on to the midfield, though, obviously they've got their two gun midfielders in the centre there, Dangerfield and Selwood. I think these two are obviously the key to Geelong's success this season. We'll start with Dangerfield. Do we place a tag on him?
No, not in my opinion. I think you obviously pay him close attention at key moments, around stoppage, and certainly when he's up forward, I expect him to spend a reasonable amount of time up forward. Chris Scott seems to like him playing about a 60-40 split. So I think Cole Chaney at various stages is going to have to match up on danger when he goes up forward, and that's where he's probably going to hurt us more. He's going to knock up his disposals through the midfield, but I think the one that we tag and sit on is Selwood, to be honest. Yeah,
I totally agree with you there. Selwood is that guy who usually is first to the ball in the stoppages, and I think that at least throughout the competition this year, it's been proven that when you shut down Selwood in the centre there, they really run out of options in those clearances. So I think Dangerfield, while he's been good up forward in the past couple of weeks, we know from the previous match that Cheney performed extraordinarily well in Dangerfield up forward in that particular match, and I think he's going to be the perfect matchup for him again when he floats forward. So, I mean, Dangerfield almost kicked 4 out of their 11 goals last week. So cutting out that sort of performance will be significant as far as our victory is concerned. What about all the other bit players throughout the midfield? Last time we had, of course, Guthrie, his career best performance, and Motlop carved us up with 4 goals. But apart from that, a lot of their younger and lesser known midfielders are probably a bit out of form at the moment.
Yeah, well, both those two that you mentioned have been a little bit out of touch since that game. Motlop in particular has been quite spasmodic, and Guthrie has tailed off certainly from that game. I think the one that tends to cause us a little bit of trouble if he's on performance is Blitzarves. I think he's always a difficult matchup. Him getting out on the wing is going to prove an interesting battle with Brodie Smith if they line up at various stages. Look, I think the key is their inside stoppage work. They don't move the ball terribly well, terribly quickly, but they do get a lot of numbers around the ball, and they do use the hands really well. So I think inside is going to be where we're going to have to perform at our best. And we've got Tomo, we've got M Crouch, and B Crouch a little bit. Sloaney gets in and under a bit, so Jared Lyons as well. So we've got the cattle, but we can't afford a slow start in the midfield like we've been having the last few weeks.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. And I'd just add on top of that one of their real strengths, Geelong, is their marking throughout the midfield. A lot of their game plan relies on, that slow movement that you said, but it's a lot of kicking up the line and taking those marks, going back, kicking, marking, doing that sort of thing. And they really tailed us up last time with that sort of ball movement. So if we can really stop that and get our fluid ball movement and not give them the ball back through some horrific turnovers like we've seen over the past couple of weeks, then our ball movement should be superior to theirs. We'll move on to the forward line. We'll come back to some of that stuff a little bit later. But we'll I want to discuss Tom Hawkins in particular. I think he's been horrendously out of form, and a lot of people on the Geelong big footy boards have been saying the same things. Outside of Hawkins, though, they don't really have many other forwards. Maybe Menzel, but yeah, it's not looking good for them up forward.
No, I think they're going to really struggle to kick a score, and I think that's where if we can contain blokes like Danger and Motlop coming through the middle, Jimmy Bartell's always going to bob up, although he's coming back from being rested. Tommy Hawkins is almost Cloak-esque at the moment in the way he's playing. I would expect Tales to towel him up. Hardigan can more than account for Stanley. I think we match up particularly well. The only one, as you mentioned, that could get off the chain is Daniel Menzel. So our mid-sized defenders, Lever and perhaps Cheney at various times, are going to have to be on their mettle there. But certainly I think it's their midfield scoring strength that's going to be a bigger danger than their forward six.
They're one of those teams that doesn't really have that identifiable small forward. I know they've got in their team Cockatoo and perhaps McCarthy that will be rotating through that forward line, but like you mentioned, it'll be their midfielders rotating through there that will cause some damage. I'm really worried about Motlop. I think while he's been out of form, he just for some reason always plays really well up forward against us.
Yeah, and he's due.
He's due for a big game, and I think maybe Chris Scott's the coach of Geelong, right? Or is it Brad Scott?
Chris.
Yeah, Chris. Oh, they look the same. I mean, Chris Scott has probably put a rocket up Motlop's ass a little bit and really challenged him to be up forward and a target for them this week. And yeah, if that ends up being the case, I think Brown will have his hands full coming back from those couple of weeks out. What about Shane Kirsten? Are you worried about him?
No. In a word, no, not really. I mean, it's hard to know how people are going to perform on the day, but I just think looking at those matchups down back, I don't see any of those players getting off the chain and really hurting us. I would be very surprised.
Yep, I'd agree. I don't really rate Kirsten all that highly, and I think it was interesting how they tried Mitch Clark a couple of weeks ago, but he's been absolutely terrible. So yeah, they're really struggling to find that tall forward. Moving on, though, I think
Harry Taylor might
of course,
fade forward a little bit, and he's one that he's a bit like bloody Westhoff for Port. He always seems to get us, I reckon, Harry Taylor, when he's forward. So he'd be one to maybe drift down. But I think with Henderson being out, that actually limits Taylor's ability to play the swingman role. So he might be camped in the back line this week.
Yeah, I would think so, especially with our tall targets down there. I think we'll go back and have a look a little bit at the game at Adelaide Oval where we lost to Geelong, probably our worst performance of the season. I think when I was watching a little bit of the replay, our ball movement was extremely one-dimensional. We basically allowed Geelong to have an extra at the fall of the ball, one kick ahead of the play, pretty much the entire match. That extra player in the middle really dominated against us, and I think the extra pressure that their midfielders were applying for that big, Dangerfield return game really, really tailed us up throughout the centre. But since that game, we've pretty much changed our ball movement to be a lot more dynamic, and I think with our ability to switch up to those short kicks, the handballs and the long kicks, that if we can really execute that plan well, it'll go a long way to us winning. How do you see it, Feenix?
Yeah, the Geelong game seemed to be the catalyst for a bit of a tweak from Pyke. I mean, I think during the first 3 or 4 rounds, we were all saying that we're getting most of our goals through rebound 50s and generating a lot of run off the half-back line, but we weren't really doing so well in the mid. So our team defence and our general structure is a hell of a lot better than it was back in round 4. And you'd expect that. I mean, Pyke was, 4 games and a couple of NAB challenges into his stint at Adelaide. So we look like we're playing a far more organised structure now than we were against Geelong. And I think Geelong were able to take advantage of the relative newness of our structures and game plans. And I don't think they will have it all their own way this time around.
No, I definitely don't think they'll dominate us in the way that they did last match. And one of the things you did mention there was we used to rebound a lot from defence. We were in a big period during that time that we played Geelong where we were conceding huge inside 50 counts.
Yep.
It was 61-44 in the Geelong match, 68-37 against the Bulldogs, 60-48 versus Hawthorn. Of course, those being 3 losses for us, and even 52 each against a really shit Fremantle team. So.
Yep.
What do you see that's changed?
Well, we certainly, I think we're not pushing up as high in defence, and I think that we were doing a little bit of the all in sort of thing. We're getting sucked in a little bit to the contest, and we were getting beaten on the outside. And whilst we have some reasonable speed in parts, we're still not what I would call a super quick team. And Geelong really exposed us on the outside of the contest. They were able to give 2, 3, 4 little gives, get the ball to the outside, and because they were winning a lot of the inside ball, they were just toweling us up out of those stoppages. We're not playing that game anymore. You don't see 2 or 3 Crows players getting sucked into the clearance or the contest now. We're a lot more settled on the outside, and I think we get back defensively a lot better and far more organised than we did back then.
And I think one of the keys to our midfield not getting sucked in as much is that I think Pyke has really defined the roles for some of our inside midfielders better than it was earlier in the season.
Yeah.
The issue that we always had in previous years was, the whole conversation of can we play Matty Crouch, Scott Thompson and Jared Lyons in the one team? And back then it seemed like the answer was no, but at the moment with Lyons' new role as a link man through the midfield and playing a bit up forward, he really allows Matty Crouch and Tomo to do that inside grunt work, and even playing Brad Crouch through the centre as well, who's been a clearance beast for us at the moment. Having those clearly defined roles and having someone who's the target to go and get the ball, whether it's a ground ball, whether it's from the ruck contest or whatever, allows us to not get sucked in as much. And Tomo was a huge issue earlier, and particularly in the Geelong game. I think I was quite critical at the time of Tomo's performance in that particular match. But he doesn't seem to be doing that as much, so it's really positive for our structures there, that those defined roles are giving us a lot more clarity throughout those contests. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting one.
Jared Lyons' stat sheet is a real study in this conversation, because the way his game has changed since he was first brought into the team, the profile of his stats in terms of his clearance numbers, his contested possessions, and his outside work, he now really is a distributor for us on the outside. And whilst he'll still go when he needs to go, he is a real illustration of defined roles, as you rightly mentioned, because he's very much now the guy that will distribute out of a clearance, whereas you've got the Matty Crouch and the Scotty Thompson, who are, and to a reasonable degree, Brad Crouch, doing a lot of the grunt work.
Yeah, and it's great for his career too, because he had a lot of issues breaking into our side, and I always thought he was a bit of a vanilla player playing that inside role up against, Matty Crouch and Tomo, who were superior players. But in his new role, I think he's really found his home in our team, and it seems like he's almost the new Richard Douglas for us in some ways.
Yeah, very much so. His inside 50s numbers and his goal scoring involvement numbers are up, and that's exactly what we need from Jared. Together with Sloaney's power running and just great work all round. Lyons, along with our 2 outside wingers, Atkins and Smith, really provide us with some good run and carry. And good distribution, particularly Atkins and Lyons, going into our forward 50. Which is why, for example, last week we took 15 marks inside 50, because we had that distribution outside of the stoppage.
Yeah, and it makes us more damaging up forwards as well. We have Lyons, Atkins and Douglas on top of our already very beefy forward line that can get down there and kick goals. I mean, I think Lyons and Atkins have kicked goals in most of the past couple of matches, and even some of our backline players like Smith in this match, Henderson even, rotating through there, that makes even, 8, 9, 10 plays that could rotate through there and cause damage for the opposition. So that's a real strength of our team, I think, the versatility of some of those players. And yeah, I'm really happy for Jared Lyons at the moment.
Yeah, likewise. And you'll see Henderson play a different role, I think, this week. I think you'll see him play further up. Because we're obviously got the manpower down back. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him in conjunction with Smithers and Atkins and those blokes. The one interesting selection, Scorpus, is Riley O'Brien coming off the rookie list and being an emergency. You wonder whether it's just there to give the lad a bit of encouragement or whether there might be a little bit of doubt over Source this week.
Well, I'm not sure it's either of those things at the moment. I think he could very well be the travelling emergency, and not for the reason that Jacobs is, in doubt of getting an injury or something, but just for the fact that I have a feeling we like to give some of our younger guys that travelling emergency experience to, travel with the team down to Geelong,
Big gamble.
Big
gamble taking a ruckman as your emergency. I would have thought they'd take Seeds. You take a ruckman and you lose a key mid or someone like that in the warm-up. It changes the whole profile of the team. I would be surprised if he travels. I think he's on the emergency. My read is that there might be a small doubt over Source.
Yeah, that's a possibility. It wouldn't be a surprise if they brought two emergencies down if they were really keen. But I think what I was struggling to say before is that we try and give our younger players that learning experience as the travelling emergency, to travel with the team, see the preparation that goes into the away games, to really prepare them for some of the games in the future. And I think we saw Wig was one of those cases a couple of weeks back. He hasn't really featured on the emergency list since that match, but he was the travelling emergency for, I think, the Gold Coast game from memory. So, yeah, I agree it's risky to bring along just one ruckman as a travelling emergency. We might bring two, but it'd be good to see him get a bit of experience as a traveller, I guess, but it would hurt our SNFL team, I think.
His elevation is a real credit to the lad. He's worked really hard and he's improved. And if you get out and watch an SANFL game, for those that are listening, he's not the the nervous lad that we saw play those couple of NAB Challengers games. He's developing into a really solid ruckman, and he's an absolute competitive beast. So good on him. Yeah,
definitely one of the better ruckmen in the SNFL at the moment. I guess the final thing that I want to touch on before we wrap up our little preview of the Geelong game is the home ground advantage for Geelong. We've lost our past 8 matches at Kardinia Park. The last win, incredibly, was round 10, 2003, where we defeated Geelong by 17 points. That's a season where we made the finals and Geelong didn't. The only player that's still playing from back then was Enright. And yeah, just some interesting stats like Scott Welsh kicking 3 goals, Bickley 25 touches, and Edwards 23 touches. So Feenix, the home ground advantage though, is this going to be an issue for us?
Well, obviously it is an issue just because of the history. I think, this year, obviously, there's a fair bit of construction going down at Kardinia Park, isn't there? So their crowd numbers aren't as high. Not that makes a huge difference, but it's probably like playing on a big version of Unley Oval where they only have half the ground open to spectators. Look, it seems this team isn't really impacted by venue this year to the same degree. We've won at the MCG. Obviously, we had that fantastic win over at Domain. So I think maybe a 1 or 2% factor, but certainly not the massive factor that it has been in the past. And of course, Sydney have shown that Geelong are well and truly gettable down there. So I think the players would be going in pretty confident, and I don't think Kardinia Park would really, or Skilled Stadium, whatever the hell it is, would really hold too many fears for them, to be honest.
Yeah, I was just about to mention the Sydney match, because one of the things with Geelong's home ground advantage is they've been so good over the past, 10 years or so that their home ground advantage is just built on the back that they've been a good team as well. And we've seen that they've been beatable down there in the past couple of matches, so I don't think it will be too much of a trouble for us. Are you tipping us this week, Feenix?
I am actually. I'm pretty confident of at least a very good showing. I don't think, in the past we've gone down there and we've played them and we've never looked in the game irrespective of the score. We've always looked like we're playing catch-up and we're a little bit overawed and, Geelong seem to be controlling the proceedings. But I don't think it's going to be the case this time around. We're flying. I think the team is playing with a lot of confidence. They have been a little bit going through the motions over the last couple of weeks, but my own impression is that they've set themselves for this particular game. A win probably cements a top 4 spot for us. Obviously, the Cats will be, looking to consolidate and make a run for the top four as well. But I think by their own admission, the Cats aren't going terribly well at the moment. So I'm tipping us by a couple of goals.
Yep, completely agree with you there. I'm also tipping Geelong by a couple of goals, and I think
us or Geelong?
Adelaide.
You said Geelong.
Did I say tipping Geelong? Well, damn it. I mean, I'm definitely not tipping Geelong. I think we will be the better team on the night. I agree. We've definitely set ourselves up for this game, and you could just see the way that we were managing players like Brown and Laird. I think Laird's injury was so incredibly minor to leave him out of the team last week, and bring him straight back in shows that we were trying to ready all the players with those little niggles for this particular match. Brown, of course, coming back in is huge for us as well, so I wouldn't be surprised for us to win by a couple of goals, but it could even be a blowout if Geelong really performs like they have in the past couple of weeks. If they play anything like the Fremantle match, I think we will beat them quite comfortably.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I think the two keys are a good start by the midfield and getting themselves into the game early, and we need to lift our defensive pressure inside our forward 50. So Charlie and Mitch McGovern need to fire up a little bit, and our inside mids need to hit the ground running. If we do those two, if I see those two things in the first quarter, I'm going to be pretty confident, I think.
Yep, totally agree. All right, I guess it's time to move on to Game of Crows, which is still on. So would you believe it, Feenix, that Mr. Joel Constable, who's been putting in Twitter predictions regularly every single week, has come up with another 3 points. He suggested a career-high tackles to Brad Crouch, and what do you know, in the Collingwood match he had 10 tackles, a career high for him. That's another 3 points. He is leading the leaderboard by an enormous margin. He's currently got 8 points. Mr. Mystery Guest Bonkers, myself, Vardy Magical on 1 point. It's looking pretty unlikely that we'll be winning this one. But we're still going to continue the game because there's always a sneaky chance for some of us. I'm not going to run through the rules. I think everyone's pretty familiar with Game of Crows as it is at the moment. My prediction this week, Laird, career high contested possessions. I was looking just at his stats. I think he's back in the team, might do pretty well. Career high would be 17 for him, so yeah, that would be a 3-pointer for me. How about you, Feenix?
Interesting. Well, first of all, I think that Joel Constable is actually part of the Illuminati, because some of the shit that he's pulled out of his ass to bloody get to the lead that he's got is just actually ridiculous.
Yep.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and if it comes up, I'm actually going to try and claim double points. But I reckon Daniel Talia will have more marks than the entire Geelong forward line.
Ooh, that's a good one. Would that be worth 3 points? I think I'd give you 3 points for that one, Feenix.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll see how that one goes. Hopefully Feenix or I can start etching back that lead against Joel, because he's absolutely dominating. He's definitely in the running for that case of beer at the end of the season. In fact, may as well get his address now and send it to him. But you can, if you're listening, you can enter through the usual places: Twitter, Facebook, Spreaker comments, or the Big Footy thread for this particular podcast. We'll go through the SANFL team now really quickly. We're playing Woodville West Torrens Saturday, 2:10 p.m. at their home ground, which has a ridiculous name. I'm not even going to attempt to say. This is not a televised match, unfortunately. No notable
That's Morn Team Hyundai. That is Morn Team Hyundai.
Okay, well, it's a bad name. We're going down there. Like I was about to say, no notable ins for us. I guess we've got Seedsman and McKay coming back in from our AFL team, but unfortunately, Troy Menzel's still out with that concussion. He's been out for now 3 weeks, I think. We've still got Otten, Van Berlo, Knight, Shaw, and Loudon also missing. We lost last week, didn't we?
Yeah, both teams actually had disappointing losses last week. We lost against the Bays. I can't remember who the Eagles lost against. Look, I think with those outs, we may struggle against the Eagles this week. We're probably just going the last couple of weeks, so it's going to be a very interesting game. And Eagles aren't a bad side, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Eagles got up over us.
Yeah, I mean, we would have two AFL additions replacing top-up plays in Seedsman and McKay, I guess. But we'll have an omission, of course, for the travelling emergency as well. So it'll be interesting, and yeah, I don't think I'll be betting on us to win this match, unfortunately. We'll move on to the other AFL matches, because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on this week in particular. We'll start with Collingwood versus North Melbourne, or Etihad Stadium tomorrow night, Friday night. North Melbourne's in horrendous form, whereas Collingwood has really shown something this week. North, Jared Waite's an omission for them, which is big for them. I'm tipping Collingwood this week, Feenix.
Yeah, me too. For Solo is a big in for them. And whilst Jared Waite hasn't been in great touch over the past few weeks, he's still a key out. Petrie's only just going. It'll be interesting to see how Big Drew goes this week. He's been under the pump a bit, and he's a bit of a proud bloke and a likeable sort of a bloke, but you can tell he's struggling. I reckon the Pies get up as well.
Yeah, and that'll really put some interest into the race for the 8, because if Port can get up over GWS at Adelaide Oval, which I guess we'll talk about now, the race for the 8 will definitely heat up. I think that would reduce it to 1 match or 2 matches outside the 8.
Yeah. I can't see the Power getting up over GWS. Can't see it.
Neither can I, really. I mean, the one thing that's always been the case with Port Adelaide over the past couple of seasons is whenever they had a little bit of a chance to be rated by the media and have that, chance to get into the 8 or make finals or whatever, they've always failed. They are a terrible team at folding under pressure and under weight of expectation. And I think GWS will give them a touch-up at Adelaide Oval, knowing that they have to, get a win to consolidate a top 4 spot for GWS.
Yeah, and it's their second trip down here, so they've done it already this season, and they were gallant for much of the match against us earlier in the year. It was a pretty good showing by them. I think they'd be pretty disappointed if they didn't get up over the Power this week, particularly, and no disrespect to the guy, but Johnny Butcher's back in. He was the future. I think he's the past now, so I don't know where they're going to get their goals from, Port, to be honest.
Yeah, Johnny Butcher's a really good SNFL reserves player, so it'll be interesting to see what he does against GWS this week. Another match I really am interested in, another Sunday match, Essendon versus Brisbane at Etihad Stadium. This is a massive, massive spudbuster, a race for the top pick, I guess, for the season. And I think Brisbane Lions will choke massively and lose this one by a huge margin.
Oh, interesting. I was listening to SEN on the way home this afternoon, and they were I forget who it was talking, but made a really good point, basically saying that if the Lions players are really behind Lepic, then they will play their guts out this week. So if nothing else, it will show exactly, I think, what the attitude of the Lions players are. Dylan McStay coming out is a big loss for them. And for Essendon, it's our first look at Francis, who was their first-round draft pick, SA boy. He's had a few problems, leg injuries, I think calf, but he comes in for his debut, so it'll be good to see how he goes. But I'm with you. I reckon the Bombers haven't been playing too bad, and I reckon they get up this week.
Yeah, I think it works in their favour that this game is played at Etihad, and even if Brisbane decide to put in that extra little bit of effort for Lepic this week, I don't rate him as a coach at all, and I think their squad is absolutely horrendous. They have taken over the mantle from Carlton as having the worst squad in the AFL, and I just can't see them winning in really any position on the ground. And that's saying something, because they're playing Essendon, who are pretty bad themselves, so it'll be one to watch.
It's hard to rate Lepic. By all reports, he was well liked and respected at Richmond as an assistant. And with the bloody squad that he's got and the chaos that's up there at the moment, the lack of money, I reckon whilst I tend to agree with you just from an outsider looking in, I think it's a bit harsh to judge him under these circumstances. But I do think that his future might be decided this week.
Yeah, just the one thing I don't like about Lepic's game style, I think it's a real mark of a coach that isn't of a high quality, is he really likes to flood players into the defensive area when they're getting smashed. And while it's a tactic that obviously limits the damage, it's not really backing in their own structures. And I just really don't like seeing that sort of tactic pulled out. And it's something that we also see Richmond doing, and Melbourne in the past used to do it as well. And yeah, it's just not something that's really I rate particularly highly, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lepage was moved on at the end of the season, despite the difficulties that Brisbane have had up there, because it's pretty sad for them having all those players leave and struggles with their administration and training facilities and everything. So hopefully something goes right for them.
I mean, without turning into a Brisbane podcast, how much do you reckon that tactic is to do with marketing?
What, the flooding tactic?
Well, it's hard enough to market the Lions at the moment without them going down by 200 points every week. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't reckon. I don't reckon Lepage is pulling all the strings up there at the moment. But anyway, we'll see how they go.
Yeah, I guess the one saving grace for them this season is that they'll be getting some really solid draft picks coming in for them. So I think they've got some academy players potentially that might push up for them. Couple. So yeah, it's always, if they can actually retain these players for once, hopefully we'll start to see them push up the ladder recently, because not been good for them. I think the other interesting match, and this is one that's probably on paper not going to be all that exciting, but we've seen Richmond play reasonably well against Hawthorn in the past couple of seasons. This is again on Sunday afternoon at the MCG. Could Richmond pull another one out of the bag? And
no.
Nope, no chance.
Look, I know what you mean. Richmond can be a little bit of a bogey for the Hawks at times, but they're not playing great. Delidio's out.
Delidio's out. Well, they're no chance now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see it. Tigers aren't going particularly well. The interesting one, the one that I reckon might end up being a bit tighter than what people might think, is the Bulldogs St Kilda game. They tend to have close games, and they're both, Etihad specialists. Western Bulldogs lose Stringer this week.
He's a huge out.
Yeah, I reckon it might be a little bit. I mean, they get Liberatore back, but I reckon it might be a little bit closer than what people think.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I think on paper, and considering the form that these teams have been in, that Western Bulldogs are a much better team than St Kilda. But the Etihad Stadium factor, and St Kilda haven't been doing too badly. I mean, they're sitting 10th on the ladder at the moment, which with 8 wins, which has probably exceeded my expectations a little bit here. I mean, they're on the same wins as Port Adelaide. Conceivably, if they keep winning, they could maybe make the 8, but I just think
the percentage is horrendous, isn't it? I think
it's 19.5, which is obviously not going to cut it.
Because they slumped for a couple of weeks. But the fact that they've bounced back and they're on 32 points is pretty decent.
Yeah, and I think when you've got that hope of the mathematical chance of making the finals, you can sometimes see teams like St Kilda, not necessarily Port, but definitely St Kilda, pulling out all the stops and really putting in that extra bit of effort to prove that they're not as crap as they were last season and in the past couple of seasons. So I think I agree that it will be a closer match, but ultimately I'll still be tipping the Bulldogs just purely on their midfield strength. Another one I think that could be closer could be the Gold Coast Freo match, which is another spud buster at Metricon. I'm finding this one really hard to tip because Gold Coast are missing so many players, and Freo, they've been pretty bad, but are they that bad?
I think they're that bad at Metricon.
Yeah. I mean, I've tipped Gold Coast, but I reckon...
I mean, they've got 3 big outs, so Pavlich, Ballantyne and Barlow. And they're travelling to bloody Gold Coast. I don't see them winning. Yeah,
but the Suns have... they still have Prestia, Hall, Ablett out, so there's a lot of midfield class missing from them. But ultimately, I guess Gold Coast's much stronger forward line will give them a real look in this particular match. And Damp Squid says on the chat that Port are more likely to win than the Saints. And that's probably a fair enough call. I think GWS will probably end up winning that match, as we said before, but we'll see. We'll see on the weekend. It's an interesting round. There's a lot of good matches to watch, and there's no Thursday night match, so no one is watching this over the co-cast, hopefully, so that's good. Interesting stuff. I think just a quick mention at the end here, we have some contract re-signing news, not only for the Adelaide Crows, but also across the league. outside of our team, Andrew Gaff has re-signed with the Eagles until the end of 2018. He was a potential trade target for some people. Jack Watts also re-signed for 3 years. He was a restricted free agent. I know some people were wondering whether he'd stay at Melbourne, but he's been quite good this season. And of course, the big news
signing for Dees.
Yeah, great signing for Melbourne. He's been really, really solid this season. I think he's finally showing his potential, being that number 1 draft pick. And of course, for us, the huge news, Josh Jenkins has re-signed for 5 years. It'll take him to 2021. I think he'll be 32 then. And by all reports, he's not getting paid that much over $500K, which is probably good for our salary cap. I know you weren't a big fan of re-signing Jenkins Feenix, but what do you think of this news?
Oh, look, it wasn't that I was not a big fan of him being in the team. I just thought that he probably didn't command the salaries that were being bandied around. I think 500 to 550 is about right. Obviously, we had to give him the contract length to satisfy him. I believe that the 5th year is triggered.
Yep.
So it's 4 plus an option. Look. Macca always makes a really good point, and it's hard to argue with, that our forward line is very much the sum of the parts, and he's very much an integral part of that whole structure. So, glad to have him on board, and I'll stop calling him trade bait now.
Yep, completely agree. I was really hoping that he would re-sign. I think he's, like you said, a key component of our forward line, and being the number 1 forward line in the competition, you don't want to be breaking that up anytime soon. And as much as Sanders on Big Footy likes to say, Tyrone Vickery is nowhere near the player that Josh Jenkins is. So we're not getting Vickery, thank Christ, because he is absolute garbage, and we can keep Jenkins in our forward line. Now on to signing Brad Crouch. I think he'll be the next one to re-sign. Can't see him leaving.
You would think so.
Yeah, you would definitely think he'll be staying. And that would be big for us because of our player retention. That will be our 4 targets for this year re-signed. Obviously, at the moment, we've had Smith, Talia, and now Jenkins re-signed, so Brad Crouch would round out that 4 quite nicely.
That would really disappoint Craig Hutchinson, because he's tried really hard to get Jenkins to Brisbane and Brad Crouch to Victoria. So Hutchie'd be severely disappointed, I think.
Yeah, it's just not happening, to be honest. Brad Crouch...
No, I don't think so.
I think he'd be very happy with the way that we've managed him. Probably not as happy when we dropped him, but at the moment he's getting back into great form. I think he's been quite happy with the way haven't pushed him on contract when he's been a little bit out of form. So, yeah, he'll be another gun for us in the future, and happy to see him re-sign on a decent length contract. But I think that brings us to the end of the Crowcast preview for this week. Another great episode. For everyone listening in, hopefully on the recording as well. Don't forget to check back for our interview that we did with the guy from the Austin Crows. That was in Tuesday Night Live this week, so you can listen to that already in your favourite podcast places or Spreaker, which we recommend. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, both BF Crowcast there. Give us a like and follow and whatever. Recommend us to all your Adelaide Crow supporting mates, because the more listeners that we can get on this podcast, the better it will be, hopefully. So it's always good to get those listeners up, and we've been doing pretty well, Feenix, over the past couple of weeks, you'd have to say.
Yeah, we really appreciated everyone that's been tuning in. The numbers have been solid. It'd be great to have 1 or 2 more reviews on iTunes. I know not many people actually listen to us via that medium. Most people are using, podcast apps or whatever. But anyone that is using iTunes, it'd be great if you could give us a little review. That'd be good. But no, thanks to everyone. The support this year for our podcast has been fantastic.
Yeah, I'm certainly very happy across all of our podcasts, and also I think the Crowbar guys have been very happy as well with their cast, which you can also find on Spreaker, and it's a great listen. So
good value.
Yeah, across all of our casts, I think we're really, really happy with everyone who listens in on a weekly basis, and our loyal supporters. And of course, Feenix, you'll be back on Sunday for the review cast, live 7 p.m.
Yep, so certainly will.
Hopefully it's all happy days there for us. And of course, this podcast will be back live 7:30 p.m. on Thursday next week. But of course, there's recordings always available on Spreaker, so no pressure to listen live. Thanks everyone for listening, who has listened live, and those listening to the recordings. And yeah, that's it for the Crowcast preview, so we'll see you next week.
See you, mate. See you guys.